Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. This is Sophie here, and we are bringing this episode live from our apartment studio in Austin that we're currently building out. It's an exciting project to decorate the walls, get the studio turning into a creative space to get our mind going, and a space to really just let go and tap into our creativity, which I think is very fitting for today's topic. We received a question from a listener who wanted us to talk about the connection between anxiety, overthinking, and creativity and work. And this is something that I have really struggled with so much in my life, and I continue to struggle with this. So I'm excited to dissect this, to try to better understand how can we better tap into our creativity? How can we better allow ourselves to get tasks done in a more efficient manner without overthinking things all the time? Before we get into this topic, we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from the community. That's what this segment is for. So email us at info@livelifeumpotted, your questions, topics, whatever it is, we want to hear from you. That's the point of this segment, right? So let's get into the conversation.
So I think this question is really relevant in our lives. I think it is very easy to, one, just in our lives have anxiety and allow it to form into different parts of our lives without us realizing. And I think one of those is work, especially because there's typically deadlines with work. There's a certain way we learn to work. And I think it's really important to question our relationship to working. It's important to question our relationship to all things because anxiety can manifest very sneakily into a lot of different areas of our life. And when that happens and we're not aware of it, it can cause us to not feel great. It can cause us to say things. It can cause us to act in ways we wouldn't otherwise act because we aren't aware of what is fueling us. So I think narrowing in specifically on anxiety and work and creativity. So I wanted to bring up a point of view from Rick Rubin on this topic of creative endeavors and when you have a block with your creativity. And in his point of view, it comes down to one or two reasons. And the central theme is judgment. Either you're judging yourself or you have a fear of others judging you. And I think that is very accurate. It's like his whole thing is just write or whatever you're doing, act as if it's just a journal entry and no one's going to see it. There's no purpose in doing this because nothing's going to happen from it. And I think this is maybe more specific to creativity, but could be applied to other productivity things. But I think it's an important question to ask ourselves. If we feel anxious about what we're currently working on, is it because we deep down are judging it, or are we deep down fearing judgment from others? So I think that can be our launching point of going deeper into, well, how do we deal with the self-judgment? How do we deal with the fear of judgment from others? So I'm going to ask you that, Sophie.
What a great question. It really has me thinking about I think a lot of times it's hard to separate. So let's just say you're drawing, right? I was sketching something a few days ago when I was on the plane. We were coming back from Joshua Tree, and I was trying to draw the Joshua Tree. And I just was I noticed this feeling of frustration coming up, of anger coming up, of I'm never going to be able to draw this right. And that's a very vivid feeling that I experienced when I was younger, where I would try to draw things and do these creative things. I think when I was 8, 9, 10, and all this pressure would get put on. And I don't know where this really originated from. I think my first thought is going to school and how the first time in life beyond the ages of 1, 2, and 3, when we start getting immersed in the school system, all of a sudden, any sort of output we're creating, any sort of work that we're doing, is for the purpose of getting graded. It's for a purpose of some sort of feedback of something that, from the age of kindergarten all the way up till high school, you are constantly being told that either this is right or this is wrong. There's always some sort of feedback. And I think what I'm seeing in my experience after leaving my corporate job and now really trying to hone into my creativity and be more connected to myself and that innate creativity that I think we all have is noticing how much of that block comes up. And like you said, Daisy, it's the question of, and an answer to which many of us struggle to even understand, myself included, which is that, where is this judgment coming from? Why are we judging ourselves when we go and write the poem? Why are we judging ourselves when we, even if it's not creativity, right? Say you're preparing for a presentation in the corporate world and you're getting ready to make this presentation for your group. Why are we stressing out so much and overthinking it and coming kind of into this, like, for me, it's this freeze bubble of, I was doing work the other day for our podcast and we're planning this event that we're really excited for in Austin coming up. And I went and sat down on the couch and I opened up the laptop and I just froze. I felt overwhelmed. I felt stressed. I felt like I didn't know how to just let go. And I think for me, there has been this huge fear of failure. There has been this big fear of, if I don't do this perfect, again, I think this is a topic we talked about probably about a year ago. I think maybe it was probably January of 2023. We did an episode about the illusion of perfection. And it's interesting to revisit this now with all this growth that we've had of kind of, is there such thing as perfect? What should we be striving for, if anything at all, when we are doing these creative works and we are doing these projects? And I also just want to mention, there were jobs that I were at where there was no room for error. There was no room for me to make a mistake. I have a vivid memory of sending an email to the wrong party and my boss coming in and panicking and being like, you sent the email to the wrong person. This is when I first graduated from law school. And I think the point here is not to say that thoroughness, diligence, and attention to detail is not incredibly important, but maybe to highlight the fact that those are all skills we can naturally do when we relax. Those are skills that we naturally tap into when we're not overthinking the product that we're trying to create, and we're actually just allowing ourselves to create. And I think letting go of that fear of failure, letting go of that fear of judgment, which we can dive more into, can be really helpful to recognize that, why does this have to be the end piece, the final piece? Why am I putting so much pressure on this without just recognizing that I'm always learning, right? Like, we're always growing in our creative works.
Absolutely. We're always growing, but maybe what's happening is the act of growing is the act of relaxing, because when we relax, we're just taking action. And for the example, Soph, where you said that you would be stressed that your boss was going to critique that you didn't put a certain comma or a certain period in the right position within the email. Now, you said there was a few occasions where this happened and you were critiqued. And from that experience, it sounds like you created an idea of yourself of, you were someone that has messed up, and you associated having messed up with a certain level of, I don't know if it was like fear, hatred, putting a lot of pressure on yourself. It's interesting to think about how conditioning comes into play here and how it formulates an idea you have of yourself. And oftentimes that can be a negative formulation of the idea you have about yourself. And over the course of life, we can just build on this and build on this and build on this. Like, say, if you were a bad student, people can say they were a bad student till they're 50, 60, 70 years old because they've identified so strongly with that, when that was just one experience they had that continued to build and build and build and build. When in reality, this person who was a horrible student, if they let go of that idea and they got the help that they needed, maybe they could with such ease get an A on a test, or with such ease they could send an email without being fearful about a period or a comma being in the right place. So the point I'm making here is that we are so capable. We are so capable of learning. We are so capable of adapting. But it's once we get stuck on these ideas of who we are. Like, I agree. Like, when I was at my first job at an agency in New York City, I was so stressed that I was going to send the wrong thing, or I sent the wrong newsletter to Carnival Cruise Lines once, the whole CEO C-suite team. And it was a horrible experience. It was so scary. So from that point on, it marked my idea of myself as, oh, I'm someone who sends things incorrectly. No one trusts me. So I began to fall and lean heavily into that. That was just letting the anxiety build and grow. And I wasn't stopping the anxiety from growing. So bringing this back to anxiety in work and creative endeavors, I think the best thing we can do for creativity is to let go of any ideas we have or any narratives we have of ourselves, of actually relaxing. That's why they say when you feel like you need to buckle down and focus on this email you're going to send because you're so stressed and your boss isn't going to get the right email if they don't send it right now. And like everything starts to feel like, oh, it's like the last breath I can take. Like I'm so anxious. It's like, okay, that's when you should go out, see some friends, take a break, take a breather, take a walk around this block. Like anxiety will tell us that things are urgent. Anxiety will tell us that we have to do this right now. And I think part of breaking this pattern is being able to have perspective and to zoom out and kind of laugh at yourself of the narratives you're creating of how serious this must be and putting so much pressure onto something, because taking a break is always going to help you break the narrative you have of yourself. And this narrative you have of yourself is making you work backwards, in my opinion, because think of it. Think of your mind and what it's saying on a Monday morning after a long weekend of doing things. You're very busy. You got a lot to catch up on. As you're working, are you just working? Are you just in flow? Or is your mind working against you? And I think where anxiety comes into play with stopping us from working is that we are working against ourselves as we are forcibly trying to work. So that's what takes so much energy. That's why we get so stressed. And that's why it takes us so long. Whereas if we are able to get our head in the right place, maybe we could get things done more quickly and more efficiently because we're not working against ourselves. We're not having to push extra hard to work to push back on the inertia that's pushing us back the other way. So I think I'm really learning this. And this is why people, I think, microdose mushrooms for work makes you stop thinking about yourself. I think that's a trend that's been happening. And maybe that is a little bit more productive than coffee on days where you can't stop thinking about yourself and how you're anxious and how you're fearful. Maybe microdosing on mushrooms can help you work through it more quickly and say, oh, right, that was silly. Okay, now I'm going to go work. You know, I think we undermine, or we have a tendency to undermine, how much we go through mentally on a day-to-day basis and how that prevents us from being more in flow, enjoying more, because we don't want to acknowledge that we do go through shit in our head. We want to put on a front and say, no, things are great. Things are great. But the more we're able to acknowledge these things, the more we can build this self-awareness, and how when we do build this self-awareness, we can say, oh, something's up. Okay, let's work through this and let's get back to work. I know that I can take 15, 20 minutes to recalibrate myself and then get back into it. That's an okay thing to do, because the more self-aware you are, the more quickly you can work through these things, because the natural cycle of life on a daily basis, a weekly basis, whatever it may be, to truly feel free and relaxed and in flow is by letting go of these narratives we have of ourselves.
Yeah, I'm getting excited because there's a lot to cover here. So there's a few things I want to say. I'm going to start in chronological order. So when I was in high school, I vividly remember like I had like a 2.8 GPA or something that wasn't good. And I went to a school where people really valued education. And I vividly remember having so much anxiety about my homework and about my test grades and comparing myself to everybody else in my schools. Everyone's going to an Ivy League college. Everyone's going to a top school. And I ended up going to University of New Hampshire for the first year, which I think was rated like not too highly. And I remember being insecure about that of, you know, this is where the narrative started to form. I compared myself to other people in a formative year during high school. I created this idea that I wasn't as smart as other people. And then all of a sudden, my external things started reinforcing that, right? The power of our life started to reinforce, oh, UNH isn't as ranked as highly as Cornell, so I must be dumb. So then I went to UNH and I was determined to transfer because I wanted to go to better school. And I ended up going to BU, which is ranked much highly. And in hindsight, I'm really great. I pushed myself. It's really awesome. I pushed myself. It's really great. I pushed myself. But I really start to see that even though I started to get to college and get to BU, and all of a sudden I was getting straight A's, and I graduated cum laude, and then in law school, again, doing really well, graduated with honors. Although I started to tap into this side of me where I let go and I was tapping into this, the intelligence of the universe, the intelligence of that we can all tap into, even though I was doing that, there was still a part of me that was holding on to this idea that I was stupid or that I wasn't smart enough or that I wasn't good enough. And it's like, envision, shackles on your legs or something that's like tying your legs together. And it's like, there I am graduating from college with honors and being mentioned as cum laude as I go on the stage. But the shackles are still there. Like, I'm getting the achievement, I'm doing all these things, but there's still this underlying part of me that maybe doesn't believe it. And then I would see that happen as I was a lawyer, where people would be like, wow, you're a lawyer. All of a sudden I have this job where I'm closing these like really multi-million-dollar deals, and there is still this feeling of imposter syndrome. There is still this feeling of, but it's just me. Like, and part of that, yeah, I don't know if we can ever really feel like the thing we're doing because that's external, and there's an internal state versus external state. But I think insecurity is when we don't think we deserve to be doing what we're doing. And I really want to draw that picture clearly to, like you're saying, Daisy, this idea we create about our intellect and our academic capabilities and how that taps over, and that can continue your whole freaking life till you're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, where there is something that you're still holding on to that is preventing you from recognizing that you're not much different than Steve Jobs. You're not much different than Charlie Munger or all these people, or like the most wealthy people. When we were listening to this podcast that Daisy's dad sent us, and it's called the Founders Podcast. And there was an interview where they were interviewing David Serra, and he was talking all about how he reads autobiographies of, for example, he'll go and read the autobiography of Steve Jobs and see who Steve Jobs mentions. Basically, his point is ditch the business books, get to know people's lives. And what he would study and what he would find is that the key core to all these successful business entrepreneurs is, one of the biggest things is that, one was that they recognized what they were doing was for the collective good. So they were really letting go of thinking about them. They recognized it wasn't about them. It was, what am I putting out into the world? And I think the second most important thing, which I kind of think goes in tandem with that, is recognizing that they believed that no matter what, it was possible. This conviction. And a huge realization I've had recently, thinking about marketing, thinking about sales, is that you need to believe in what you're selling or what you're creating more than anybody else on this planet. You have to believe in it. And it is so easy, tying this back to the insecurity that you learned in grade school, that all of a sudden you're 35 years old and you're trying to build a business, or 25 years old or 55 years old, that what is getting in the way of having full conviction in what you're creating? Asking yourself that question and recognizing that you can't wait for anyone around you to validate. You need to believe firmly and confidently in what you are creating, because if you have any sort of doubt, the rest of the world will also doubt it too.
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, that these people who are ultra successful in whatever realm whatever that means, it's that they have strong conviction in what it is that they're doing and what they're building for other people. And it makes me think back to how my entire life I was so afraid to veer off from what the path was. I was so afraid to question the status quo because I was just terrified. I wanted to fit in. And think about it, within the typical school system, we are told you got to do this, you got to do this. Do not break the norm. If you fail this test, you're not going to the next test. You're not going to the next test. You got to do well in this, or else you can't make up for it. Like, whatever that is, it is what it is. But it's a rigid system where we're taught that there's only one way to do something. There is only one way to do something. And that is not learning to have conviction within ourselves. And I think there are people who are out there saying, I realized this is a system wasn't going to work for me. So I said, fuck it. And I found other ways. Like Gary Vee, I think he like jokes that he had like a 1.5 GPA. And the only class he got a good grade in was gym class. But he recognized from an early age, this system, it's not going to work for me. But I think the vast majority of people do not realize that. And if they do realize that later in life, they are considered lucky. If they are able to say, oh, I'm going to veer off from what I've been conditioned to believe. So I wanted to make that point because it's a select few people that you were talking about within this podcast that are like the ultra successful people. But think about the reason why that is because they learn to have conviction within themselves. And it doesn't matter necessarily what your success is or how you value success. Everyone wants to be successful in their own right, whether that's financial, emotional, just lifestyle, quality of life. The thing is, we can all tap into that. And I think the important thing to recognize is that we are able to sit here and say, no matter where you're at, you are able to let go of these ideas and narratives of yourself, and you can start over entirely with your abilities, with your beliefs. Like, I had such a terrifying narrative about myself when I was younger that I was stupid. I would take IQ tests and cry because I thought that I was just dumb and there was nothing I could do to change about it. Which sounds so insane to say that, but I think that is just the depths of where our mind can go when we feed these narratives that were created unintentionally from a system. Maybe it was intentional or was unintentional from something that someone said, you know, like I think we have to deeply question these narratives. And oftentimes we want to defend these narratives. We want to say, no, but I can't do that. I can't try to start something. How will I start? Because we're so terrified to defy the status quo. We like having that certainty of we can't do this. But life becomes so inherently exciting when we push back on this. And then we see how we become so powerful. And everyone, like Sophie said, this overall intelligence, like we are a human being who is inherently intelligent. If we let go of the narratives and the idea we have of ourselves, we all are blessed with the same level of intelligence. We are intelligence, you know? So I think that's a really exciting point to come to. If you can recognize that you just are intelligence, it's a matter of letting go of these ideas you have of yourself, right? So whether that idea is that growing up within your siblings, you were the smart one and you were the athletic one and you were the pretty one who participated in pageants. It's like you don't have to be any of that. You can let go and be whatever it is that you want to be, and you can start over at any point. You can begin again at any moment. And that is so exciting, and that is why we do this podcast, because we have implemented that into our lives. And constantly, we are looking to implement that into our lives. And that's why we have this podcast, because we want you to implement that into your life where you feel as though you can begin again in each moment, no matter where you're at, because you inherently are intelligence. You can do whatever you want, so as long as you tell yourself you can do whatever you want.
And if you're going to defend those limitations, if you're going to say, but, no, I can't, but I didn't go to this college, stop. Right? Like that's you getting in the way of yourself. And I say this again because I do this to myself. And flashback to when I was saying the other day, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm really anxious. So we are planning this event in Austin. It is kind of our first real event where we're working with a venue and we're working on getting vendors and we're learning about the event space. And I have never really planned events. I didn't understand all these components that go into hosting an event. So naturally, I was intimidated by that. I was like, how am I going to learn this? I feel insecure. And then I went through that anxiety cycle until fast forward 24 hours later, where I let go of that. I started relaxing into that, started talking to one of my friends about it who knows a lot about event planning. And then I started realizing, oh, this is pretty intuitive. Started looking up some articles, started to understand, oh, there's an art. You know, what are the trends of event planning? They're changing in 2024, trying to make sure community is so much more involved, recognizing, oh, right, it's not that maybe I didn't know this at one point, But it's not that I couldn't learn that. And as soon as I start reading about it, it's like, right. All I'm doing here is applying the same skills that I do with everything I've done in my life. Reading and analyzing. Reading what this document says about event planning, understanding, and processing. And I think what anxiety does that I've seen so much, I saw this in law school with my test anxiety, we think that our brains won't be able to process it, or we think we can't read, we think we can't understand all this information, when in reality, when you let go and you stop thinking and you just read the article or you just read the book, you'll be so surprised. All of a sudden, you're like talking about all of this and you understand all of this and you're so excited. And before you know it, you're proficient in this new skill.
Right. And we all like to have fun, right? Does our definition of what is fun change over time? Isn't it fun to build something or to grow something? And I think I was always at odds with that because I was so pumped to grow something. But as soon as I would hit a roadblock, I'd be like, right, I can't do this, I can't do that. So it no longer became fun because it brought up insecurities. And I think that's where this idea of growth mindset comes in that is so important, that just because you hit a roadblock, it doesn't have to inform an insecurity. It doesn't have to grow it, that you can't do this, you've never been able to do this. It can switch from that to saying, oh, well, I can say that I didn't understand that. And I can go to someone who understands it and be like, hey, what's your opinion on this? Can you help me figure this out? Can you help me understand this? And that's exciting. And we get to have connection. We get to stay open. We don't have to close down and perpetuate this idea that we can't do this, we can never do this because it's always been that way. We can end that. We can say, you know what? I actually don't understand how any of this works. Would you mind explaining that to me? And that was something that I never did. But we can turn this insecurity into a way to connect with others and to learn. And that can come back to being fun. We can bring it back to being fun. And it's interesting how I always had anxiety with work all around. And I think it's really interesting, from school to work to jobs, there was always anxiety because I was projecting it to everywhere in my life. So it's really interesting to switch from doing a job that you do to make money to doing something that you absolutely love and is entirely passionate. It is entirely you, and it is an extension of you, because that anxiety is still going to come up. And it really makes you reevaluate, but I really want to do this. So I'm going to question this idea I have of this, because if I can't do this, then I can't do anything. And that was a big realization for me. And that's not to say you can't do that within a job. You totally can. That was just a wake-up call for me. And I think Sophie said that when she was a kid, she used to try to learn the guitar, and you'd teach it to yourself in your room and you'd get so angry and you'd be so angry. But that's just anxiety, and that's working through insecurities. And we don't have to do it in an angry way. But those are just limiting beliefs that we're overcoming. And it's really uncomfortable. It's not fun. But once we're able to get over those, things become fun. Once we stop taking things so seriously, everything becomes fun.
I'm having a realization right now, kind of the role our ego plays in our frustration when trying to learn new things. And I do recall trying to learn the guitar, and I did teach it to myself. But when I couldn't get the chords right, when I couldn't play the song right, especially my mom was in the room, or my dad wanting to like show off for them, being younger and like wanting to impress them. Or I saw this with sports. I played a lot of travel sports team, and I always wanted to be perfect. Like, I was super competitive. And I think that competitive nature can be great. It can propel you forward. It can motivate you. But it does come with this, this level of like thinking maybe you're too good to learn, thinking maybe that understanding that it might take you 2 weeks to learn this, and that doesn't mean you're an idiot. Like, I think for me, the reason I've gotten so frustrated in the past, I've seen this when I was learning Adobe Premiere Pro for video editing, which I ended up learning. Again, something that was difficult at first, but it took time. And now I had this realization yesterday. I was like, I want to learn Photoshop. Why would I not? We have this Adobe subscription. Of course, let me go learn it. But the part of me comes in of, but it's going to take time. It might take you 2 months. Okay, so why can't I learn a little bit every day? Where is this expectation and this pressure that we have to learn things in 1 hour? I have to learn Adobe this morning and know it proficiently by the end of the day. And I wonder for me if that came from lawyer life where there's this expectation of, and I will say I do have the ability, I think we all do, to learn quickly when we don't overthink things. Like I really do feel like sometimes I can learn things in a day, but maybe it's understanding that, okay, maybe that's not true with everything. That yes, I have been a fast learner, but I don't need to put so much pressure myself with everything, because I think that pressure is what actually gets in the way of, there's so many things out there. Like I want to learn how to embroider clothing. Like there's so many things out there, but it's going to require me to let go of this ego that says that you know everything and that you shouldn't have to learn because you're perfect. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's that idea about?
Well, it's interesting because it's taking it back. When we first started the podcast, I dreaded it. I hated it. It pushed me to work through insecurities and it sucked. I hated it. Fast forward a year and a half, I love this. It makes me feel alive. It feels really good to be able to communicate and to express. And I love that. It brings me so much happiness now. And I think the picture that that paints is that if you have a draw, if you have a pull to do something, but it doesn't make you feel great in the beginning because you have to work through things, keep pushing, even when you want to give up, even when you want to pull your hair out, because you don't know what's on the other side. What's on the other side may bring you great fulfillment and great joy. And it might broaden your world a lot, because what is that doing? It's shattering the idea you have of yourself of, I can't do this. I'm too anxious. I've never been able to do anything. It shatters that idea when you actually accomplish or complete things for you or for whatever it is. It shows you, it gives you the confidence that you are able to do this with other things. You can apply this to other things, and it doesn't matter where you learn the lesson. The important thing is that you do learn the lesson. And the good news is, whatever it is that's in front of you right now that you're not having fun with, you can learn this lesson from questioning the idea you have of it, from questioning the narrative you have on yourself about how you relate to this thing that you're doing. Because as soon as you can question that narrative and push through it, and hey, it may not be fun, what's on the other end? Just pure intelligence of just existing and just doing something and not having to work against yourself as you work. So summarizing this conversation, it's been an amazing conversation, but I just want to say that we are limitless. We are. And our brains and our narratives are what hold us back. And that is entirely up to us, how much we want to hold ourselves back, how much we want to limit ourselves. It's also up to us how much we want to become limitless and how much we want to allow ourselves to carve a path. That is why the event we're hosting in Austin is all around passion projects. That's why it's all around lifting up other creatives, other creators who have created something that they are passionate about, and they're doing it to show others that if they want to do that, they can. If they are doing that, don't stop, because there is a network of people who are doing this. So it's connecting those people. And this can mean anything. I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that you're not working out of the old narratives of who you think you are. You're actually spending your days how you want to spend them. You're existing in this world the way you want to exist in it. And you're actually learning each day. And this can apply to literally anything. So just want to say that if you're listening to this today and you don't feel excited, you can always find excitement through the pursuit of creating something, of learning a new thing, whether it's stitching, whether it's shooting the perfect basketball hoop. Like, there's so much to learn. It's never about what you're doing. It's just the act of allowing yourself to let go of your narratives and to dive into something new that excites you, because that's what life is about. It's about being excited. And I know Sophie wants to say something, but that excites me. And I want others to feel excited as well, because we are limitless. We can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want.
And this is why before I left my job, I was able to enjoy it. I loved it for parts of it. I loved learning how to read these documents and close these deals. And yes, maybe that wasn't really what lit me up, but I had the capacity to enjoy it. We have the capacity to enjoy anything and everything that we're doing, even if it's at a job we don't want to be at, even if it's learning a sport that we're not that good at yet. It's letting go of the expectations that we should be somewhere else. It's letting go of this idea that we should know how to do something like this. It's slowing down and recognizing that we have to learn how to enjoy the journey. We have to learn how to enjoy the process of building. Because once you build the tower and the building standing, now what? Time to build the next. Isn't life just a continuous process of creating, growing, and building? And it's like, if we're not always looking for fulfillment in the, once I learned Photoshop, great, that'd be great and awesome. But there is an exciting part of not knowing. Allow ourselves to be beginners. Allow ourselves to recognize that we can learn something new. And that so much of that anxiety, to tie it up to the original question, so much of that anxiety that comes in when we are doing work is us getting in the way of that natural flow that occurs when we let go, stop thinking about ourselves, and just do it. And to anyone out there who's looking for a more tactical, logical piece of advice, set a timer on your phone for 1 hour. Do not check your phone and just work on whatever it is that you're working on. I find it really helpful for me if I'm going to a coffee shop to work to say, okay, I'm staying here for 5 hours. That's it. I'm putting myself here, and we'll see what comes out of it. And all of a sudden, hour 5 hits, and I've learned this, I've understood this, but that wouldn't have happened if I was continuously putting pressure on, I have to do this, I have to do this, just watching it unfold. Watch your creativity unfold. Watch this intelligence, this unbelievable intelligence that we all are, not that we're a part of, we are that. You are the same intelligence that literally has built planes that we fly in. Think about the magnificent innovations that human beings have created. We have light bulbs, we have electricity, we have planes, we have buildings, we have iPhones. And of course, Steve Jobs, I've heard so many times that inspiration for the iPhone came from tripping on psychedelics. Makes a lot of sense. Because we're able to tap into that understanding of there's something more than what this mind is telling us. There's something more. And when we can become that, when we can become that flow, when we can become that intelligent, we recognize that there's nowhere to get. But instead, we don't have to go external, but we have to relax inward to continue to just being what we already are.
Breaking the matrix.
Breaking the matrix of our own mind.
Or as Steve Jobs says, people no smarter than us built this world. Something like that.
Exactly.
It's people no smarter than you created the world that you abide by. So it's like create your own world.
I am not smarter than anyone else listening to this podcast.
No, we all
just tapped in.
Have the same capacity when we let go of these ideas and we stop giving weight to your GPA. We stop giving weight to the caliber of your career. We stop giving weight to these things that are only put up on a pedestal because as a society, we choose to give them weight.
And guess what? The reality of it is, as a society, if we're going to talk about the work culture, people are starting to care less about what college you went to. If you went to Ivy League school, people don't care as much as they used to. Employers don't care. We're shifting. There is this global awakening happening in the terms of how people work. And I was listening to Gary Vee talk about this the other day of how employers are understanding that this new generation is understanding that they want to really care about what they're doing. They want to be involved and they want to be able to show up as their true selves. And just recognizing that when we can let go of trying to be anything but who we are, you could spend your whole life trying to be this corporate person when in reality you are meant to write a book. You are meant to be an author. You are meant to learn how to sail. You are meant, that is you. That is your nature. You cannot change your nature. You can evolve, you can adapt. But there are parts of us that are just who we are, and we are meant to give that to the world. So don't resist who you are. Give yourself the capacity to grow, tap into the ability to change, but remember that we don't really have to work hard. We just have to learn how to relax and let go. What an amazing question. This has been amazing conversation, very timely. So thank you to our listeners. Thank you to the community for facilitating this. You guys are the reason why these conversations happen. Yeah. And I'm feeling inspired. I'm ready to go to that coffee shop. And I'm just feeling more connected to this inner knowing of it's never what you think it is.
Well, it comes down to self-empowerment. We don't have to abide by any idea of how we should exist within this world. We get to recreate what that means for us. And that's the beginning of a very exciting journey, a very exciting dance. So I'm very grateful for this question. Always like
Let's bring it in for a high five.
Okay.
That was... I'm excited.
So if you enjoyed this question, if you have similar topics you want us to talk about, if you want to put your 2 cents into what we chat about, reach out to us. Let us know. We always like to hear from you all. You can email us at info@livelifeunpotted.com. And yeah, send your topics, send your insights, send whatever it is over to us, because we love to just chat and go in circles about things and to not give answers, because who are we to give answers? We are just here to empower you, empower ourselves, and create a life that we all want to live. So we're all in charge of that. We all have to take accountability for that. And that's where the real work is at the end of the day, is when we decide how we want to live our life and we actually do it. And that starts with unpacking the ideas we have of ourselves. So that does it for today. And as always, if you like this podcast, rate it, review it, leave us some stars on Spotify, leave us some stars on Apple Music, wherever you listen. Please do that and share it with your friends, share it with your family, and we appreciate you. We will talk to you next week, and have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Have fun. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm pumped for what's next.